Okay, this is the third video on the EzRover. And in the second video, the last video, we talked about how to calibrate the rover and turn on speed control so that we could do things like drive in a straight line. So that the rover, when commanded to drive at a certain speed, would be able to do that through closed loop speed control. So if you didn't watch that last video, I would go ahead back and watch that video on how to calibrate the rover so that we can enable speed control. In this video, what we're going to do is we're going to show how speed control could then allow us to do higher level control over the rover in the form of go-to-goal behavior. So in the rover control tabs, we have several, we have 4 different ways of controlling the rover. And 3 of them are relatively low level. Turtle is through the keyboard, tank and joystick are through game pads. And so, in fact, you, the human being, are the speed control, right? But with go-to-goal, what we're doing here, instead of just directly controlling it, is what we're doing is we're saying, go to this position. In order to do that, we have to have a well-calibrated rover. So that's why I suggest you go, if you haven't watched the video on calibrating the rover, go ahead and watch that, and then come back to this video. So the go-to-goal control is very, very easy to use. So when you first start up the rover, you're sort of at the origin. We've driven a little bit here, and we can see that where the rover is now is it's gone 2,644 centimeters east, and whatever that is up. So I'm going to reset that to 0. Now the rover thinks it's back at the origin. It thinks it's back at 0, 0, which is actually here. It thinks it's back at 0, 0 and facing directly east, directly to the right. That's the sort of initial orientation of the rover when it's first been turned on or after you hit reset. So we're going to ask it to go to 200 centimeters to the right, or 200 centimeters north, right? So we're going to ask it to essentially go at a 45-degree angle up and right. This tolerance value represents an angular tolerance. This is a value that the control loop uses to decide if it's going in the right direction or not. And we want it to be fairly narrow. So angles are in radians. So if you don't remember your trigonometry, go back and look a little bit at that. But a lot of times we think about a circle as 0 to 360 degrees. And another way to think about it is radians. In radians, there are 2 times pi radians in a circle. And so this value actually here is in radians. And so I'm going to, we want to actually fairly tight tolerance, because the way that the go-to-goal behavior works is that it tries to orient the rover to be pointing at the target at all times. And as long as it's pointing to the target and making progress, it's going to get to the target. And so this value, this tolerance value, is a value that says, hey, in terms of radians, am I close enough to the desired angle towards the target or not? Or do I need to change the speed of one wheel or another in order to turn to the correct angle? Because that's basically how go-to-goal works. It's always trying to turn towards the goal. So now we've said, let's go to 200, 200, and that's our tolerance. And you can ignore this forward point thing for now. So let's just go there and I turn your attention to the pose and see what happens to the pose. And by the way, as in the prior videos, my rover is currently actually suspended in a box, so the wheels aren't touching the ground, but they are moving, so it believes it's making progress. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay. Whoa. That got a little weird. And it got there. So it did a weird thing at the beginning. I wonder if I had it reset correctly, but it made a turn and was a little bit off, but then you saw it turned into the right direction, and it ends up close to the goal. So the goal was 200, 200. The way I have the tolerance to the goal set up has to do with sort of the minimum speed of the wheel, the minimum number of turns that we can actually measure of the wheel, because we can never actually. So it's basically twice. I need to be within 2x of the minimum distance at the speed of that the wheel will turn. So it doesn't have to be exactly on 200, 200. It has to be close. And here it's pretty close. It's at 197.8 and at 196.8. Now another thing we can try is, okay, let's go back to 0. Let's go back to the origin. Actually, let's do this. Let's go to let's go back to the origin. So it's going to have to turn around, and it's going to go back to the origin. So let's try that. Okay, turned around, and there it goes, heading back, and it got there. So it's within 0.47 centimeters and 0.59 centimeters of the goal. So that's almost directly on top of it. And of course, we can go to negative if we wanted. So let's go to negative 200x and 200y. And let's start it. And it made a little turn, and it's heading up there. And there it is. So it got to negative 200.01 and negative 94.78. And now let's have it just drive back over to that 200, 200. So now it should drive in a horizontal line directly to the right and connect back up to this point over here. And it just turned. And here we go. It's adjusting its angle to try and get there. It's going a little farther. So this little line that's sort of getting shorter, the way that the software is written, it only holds a certain number of points. And so we've driven long enough so that we've maxed out the internal buffer, and it starts to throw away old points, and that's why that thing looks like it's starting to get pulled. So there we create a little triangle by driving up to 200, 200, back to 0, 0, to negative 200, 200, and then back over to 200, 200. So that implies that if we wrote software to give the rover a series of points and then could detect when it had gotten to each of those waypoints, that it could drive a much more complex path. And that's one of the extensions that would be a fun thing to do, and you could do that all in the JavaScript stack. And there'll be a few more videos on how to use this UI, in particular how to use the game pads, but then we'll move on to the internals of the software and how to modify the software. And one case we'll talk about in particular is, what would you do if you wanted to create a new rover control input that would take a series of these points that the rover would then drive to, and how would you control the rover to do that? And so that would be kind of a fun thing, and that's something that you do at the JavaScript level, and we'll talk about that in a future video. So I hope you like this video. I hope you like the go-to-go behavior, and thanks for watching.